Lacrosse, the new basics, conditioning, thinking lacrosse, an instructional youth lacrosse program for players and coaches. Kevin Sheean. These are the new basics on how to teach the game, but many of you will find them the old basics on how to play the game. They're especially important because incorrect patterns are nearly impossible to correct. Yet habits that are instilled properly at a very young age will remain in place for a lifetime. Girls and boys, with no attempt to offend anyone, all of the drills and skills on this tape may be used in both the boys' and the girls' game. This tape attempts to bring to life a series of articles that have appeared in Lacrosse magazine on the new basics, stick mechanics and running, carrying with confidence, moving with the ball to get around defensive players by reacting to specific defensive checks in the appropriate way, finding space, the secret of the game, learning to be without the ball. Those articles include coaching world teams and 5-year-olds, steal this drill, and finding space. The new basics, stick mechanics, working the stick. Today's lacrosse is probably not the lacrosse you played if you played more than 5 years ago. The changes brought about by the equipment, international lacrosse, the indoor game, and the increased athleticism and skill of the players have created a new game. This is a presentation that will ensure that you are prepared to play or coach that new game. A new vocabulary is needed to translate new ideas to the youngest players, and the best way to teach a player starting out is to describe the stick as his or her third ear. This will keep the stick always in an imaginary box around their head. Canadian throwing mechanics. I think it's time we teach players to let the stick do the work with a pull on the bottom hand rather than with a push on the top hand. The result will be more leverage, deception, and power. What will have to go is the baseball metaphor that we sometimes teach developing players with. We'll have to raise the stick and teach the players to use the stick for what it is, a lever. The tight stick. Catching is made much easier for the younger player by holding the stick in a position that finds his or her hands on the plastic and in the middle of the shaft. The ball can be caught on either side with the same motion that a goalie uses. This is also a power dodging position for when players later want to take on defensive players. The very best way I know to begin practice is in a form circle. Practice doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice does. Start with the third ear vertical cradle. Coaches should move about and help individual players. There's no sense sending them off to line drills with weak fundamentals. Once the cradle is in place, players can learn a tight stick. To learn a tight stick, place the bottom hand in the middle of the shaft and the top hand near the plastic. Players should mirror the coach, understanding that they can catch balls to the offside, low balls. No matter where the ball is thrown, they can catch very similar to a goalie. Finally, work on throwing mechanics. Let players understand that it is a pull on the bottom hand, with the stick being a lever that makes the stick work. The stick will have to be held higher for this mechanism to work. Forward passing. Your practice should begin with lines of players facing each other, each pair with a ball. At this time, you can work on perfect form. And until perfect form is in place in a player, none of the other drills will really be meaningful. This is a good time to work on a magic hands, fourth switch of hands, forcing catching and throwing in the offhand altogether, catching in space, throwing to where the player isn't, quick sticks, or one-handed pass. Four corners. Players must learn to pass and catch on the run. To do this, go to the four corners of the offensive box with a balanced number of players at each corner. Have them pass to the adjacent corner and replace to that corner. I know this is a longer pass than they normally have to make, but insist that they make it on the run and come to the ball. The improvement in your team will be dramatic. No other drill improved our team as much as did the four-corner passing drill. As players pass, they must come to the ball, but without a significant pull on the bottom hand, players will not be able to make the long distance pass. We found making this long pass made eventually making shorter passes much easier. As players progress, you can begin then to have players lead each other and pass over the shoulder. Shooting in the new era, super light sticks with instant pockets. If one area of lacrosse has changed in this new phase of the game, it's how hard people shoot the ball. More and more torque is applied by showing the goalie a number and coiling your back. More deception is added as the stick is hidden, and the result has been the velocity of shots has tripled. Notice as players gather in this form circle, they work on shooting. Shooting is different than passing in that players coil their back. Notice that the head of the stick is hidden from the goalie. Their hands are closer together. They twist, and there's a push and a pull that is violent. The goalie game, developing goalies and shooters. We invented this game originally to find a goalie, but we found we also developed shooting confidence with both hands. Simply space a set of cones in a semicircle around the cage. Players move through the cones, shooting at each cone, including a turn in the goal. It looks something like this. The goalie game. A game to condition both shooting and goaltending. We start on the right side. Notice that we use a soft rubber ball. This eliminates fear on the part of the goaltender. As we move to the left side, we shoot with the left hand. We shoot up top and on goal line extended. After everyone has a shot, we rotate positions with a new goalie. In order to build fun into the game, we invented the following scoring system. If the goalie makes a save, it's worth 2 points. If the goal is missed because of the goaltending, it's worth 1 point. Of course, when the goal is scored, it's worth 0 points. In order to build some drama into the game, the goalie makes the save with a shaft, it's worth 3 points. Here's one. Running skills, teaching players to run with power and purpose. Do kids come to you knowing how to run? Jamie Monroe, in his progressions tape, contends that much of our game is speed and power. But how much time as coaches do we devote to developing speed and power in our kids? Range of motion running may do more to develop your players' natural abilities than any of the stick drills you do afterward. Players must learn to include their entire leg in running. These high steps where the knee comes up to the belly button get the full range of motion of the leg. As players return, you're going to see a run we call a butt kicker, where players now are learning to dig in and kick themselves as they reach in and reach far back in the leg. The final run you'll see we call Deion Sanders, but I guess that's a little outdated. We now call them striders. In this run, the player runs stiff-legged all the way down, forcing the quadricep to drive the leg. The hope of all these running drills is that the full range of motion of the leg will be employed. The best power builder for young legs is the high step march. It's really a plyometric exercise. It takes some coordination, but it will really develop power in the player's legs. The best way to coordinate a player's hands and feet is to run a cone drill. We run staggered cones, including what we call the fox and the hound, straight racing, no sticks. One player chases the other. If they catch him, they give him a piggyback ride back. We run split dodges on the cones where they go left to right with perfect form. We run roll dodges with the change of hands in the middle. And most importantly, we run defensive drop steps. Use cones to teach the split dodge. Notice the players first run without sticks. They chase one another from cone to cone. When we add a stick, we now coordinate the feet and hands. As players step, they push off with the leg and drive a magic hands across the cone. Although they won't get it at first, through running these throughout a season, you'll condition perfect split dodges. Probably the hardest dodge to condition is the roll dodge. The player puts a stick through their legs and then magic hands after the roll. As you see these beginning players develop, you'll notice a common mistake. Many players will change direction and change hands as they change direction. But an invisible stick through the legs followed by magic hands will remedy that. Through repetition and intensity, you will now see players learn to whip their leg with the stick between. Do not forget to condition defensive footwork. The drop step is one of the most difficult motions to condition in a young player. You can't tell someone to drop step. You must condition it. You have to work harder to make running fun than almost anything else you'll do in practice. We do this with races with $100 grand to the winner. Candy bar, not the money. We have our winners get piggyback rides from the losers. This often ends up in a laugh riot with both players rolling on the ground. In Saturday Night Live fashion, we have to bow to the winners, saying, "I am not worthy." But be careful, because speed can destroy form. And we often have form contests where the winner is not the fastest player, but the one with the best form. Be sure to limit running to 5 to 15 minutes of your practice at most. Carrying with confidence. Teaching players to play on both sides of their body. First, you must condition magic hands, and then dodges must be conditioned to specific checks through repetition and intensity of the drill, and finally lacrosse land, the ultimate stick protection game. Magic hands. It's really important that you insist that players change hands as soon as they start playing the game. It's not that hard. It can be done with 5-year-olds, calling the movement a magic trick and practicing it like a dance. The best way to condition magic hands is to put a ball in every stick and walk players through it. Pretty soon they'll develop a natural rhythm. You can add music and dancing for some fun. But without magic hands, players are restricted to only one side in which they can go around an opponent. Conditioning dodges. Players must be able to execute dodges instinctively without thinking. This can only be achieved, again, through repetition and intensity. You must condition dodges as reactions to specific defensive checks. The 4 dodges that will be covered will be the face dodge, or ear-to-ear, done when a player comes with a downward chop, magic hands, or the split dodge, done with an open check chop, invisible stick or a roll dodge when a player is played cross-handedly, and finally, lastly, the bull dodge when a player is forced to drive through the opposing player. Line drills. Line drills must be done with intensity, with coaches supervising as a conditioning to these reactions. There must always be a coach in the middle. That coach in the middle should have fun and get into it and be competitive as he instills those dodges in his players. Use parents if you lack coaches. It's better if you have more than one coach in the middle so the dodge is repeated twice on the player's run. Players must learn to react rather than think. You need more balls as players get the hang of it. 1 ball is just too much waiting. Once you get 1 ball, go to 2, see if you can go to 3. Keep a ball next to the front man in line. If you're running the line drill with a pass and it's missed, you run after it. There's a built-in motivation. But the next player picks up the ball and the drill continues. You must have talk on line drills. If there's no talk, you have to find a convenient wall of knowledge, have players touch it, and they will automatically, instinctively, never forget to talk. Dodging is a reaction skill. Players must recognize the defensive actions and body position. The dodge they execute is in reaction to the check of the defenseman. Dodges must be conditioned and not taught. I think you'll see on these next few slides exactly what I mean. The face dodge is a reaction to a hatchet downward check by the coach. Notice that the harder the players check, the more quickly the players move their hands. Players that keep the stick more parallel to the ground will have more difficulty executing this dodge. Those players with a third-ear mechanism will be most successful. This final dodge is extremely tight and nearly perfect. Notice that the drill really gets moving as the coaches add more balls. Right? Not only do the players have to move, but the coaches have to move. No longer will players stay standing waiting their turn. Repetition and intensity will increase learning. The split dodge. Split dodge is a reaction to an open the gate check. This is the game's most effective dodge. Players go from strong hand to weak and back to strong again. The roll dodge is a counter to a cross-handed defensive action. Notice players roll away from pressure. As the player rolls, the magic hand switches and the stick is magically in the other hand. As the player rolls, he tries to put the stick as close as he can in between his legs, hiding the head of the stick. The last dodge we teach is the bull dodge. And the way to teach a bull dodge is to overcome the fear of the stick. We have found this is the way to build in confidence with the bull dodge. Start with a pool noodle. The fear of the stick is what usually paralyzes most developing players and experienced players. It's the reason they don't run through a stick. Insist that players go at your hands as you hold a pool noodle. As they build up their confidence, you can replace the pool noodle with a stick. If players are gonna go one hand, have them lead with the elbow, with the thumb at the ground. But with younger players, I really recommend. Notice as players accelerate through a pool noodle, there's no fear, there's no hesitation. They're able to build up maximum speed and drive right through the coach's hand, simply pulling back the stick and pulling back their head. We can see on this next slide that when we add a stick, the same abandon, the same reckless abandon driving through the stick is present. What's gone is the fear of the stick. One of the best games you can play is Lacrosse Land. Players learn stick protection as they move about in an area identified as Lacrosse Land by 4 cones. Stationed at each of the 4 cones are robbers who come in and freeze them by touching the head of the stick with their cross. Once they do, they are frozen. They can be unfrozen by a successful pass from a teammate. When everyone is frozen, the game is over. But it's not over. It'll be time for 4 more. It looks like chaos, but it's really fun. And Lacrosse Land is the best game you'll ever play for teaching stick protection. Here, all-world Gordon Purdy joins in a game. Notice as he follows Nick, Nick hangs his stick, and Gordon gets him. Watch Ryan Seelinger move his feet and his stick in his hands, avoiding Gordon and becoming safe in the game. Finally, Ryan is captured and the game is over. But it's not over. It's time for new robbers. Finding space, the secret of the game. Teaching players what to do without the finding space progression. Begin by teaching players not to ball chase through the discipline of 3-man weaves. Build on this a 3-on-2 cone drill to teach the ball back motions on defense and to teach finding space on offense. This will then lead into good guys, bad guys, a ground ball drill which will then apply these finding space concepts. With this foundation in place, you will now be able to move to fast break and eventually to a motion triangle in which players understand the 3-man weave drill is the best drill I know for teaching players to maintain space. Simply roll the ball in the middle on a traditional weave. When you add a pass to the 3-man weave drill, you have the best lacrosse talk drill you can have. Brian calls ball and scoops. On the far side, John calls help. As John comes to the middle and rolls the ball, Nick will call ball,